At the beginning of the God Valley incident, we saw a black ship, but this was likely shown to us for a good reason. This is more than likely not just any black ship, but the black ship. The same vessel that in the present timeline is used by the man marked by flames to guard the final road Poneglyph. Yet if this is true, it would also mean that his identity is whoever stole this ship from the government during this event. I also have a pretty good idea who it was. The reason why it is so obvious that this is the same ship that in the current story carries the last road Poneglyph is because the scene where this ship was shown was entirely pointless. This ship is revealed to actually be a transport carrying slaves to God Valley, yet this was something the story had already revealed back in Kuma's flashback, where we saw that Kuma, Ivankov and Ginny had been escorted to the island along with other slaves to take part in the native hunting competition. Kuma's flashback is also where we originally learned the other thing brought up in this scene, which was that Ginny was the one who had cracked the world government's communications about the celestial dragons going to God Valley, meaning that in terms of the plot, this scene with the slave ship only recapped information we already knew. In other words, this entire scene was filler. Filler is something that basically never happens in One Piece. While the series is known for its huge length, in reality, One Piece is one of the most dense manga ever written. Every single One Piece chapter is essentially a fight for space to include everything important for the plot, where even the smallest panels or the most minute lines of dialogue almost always are relevant to the story. Eiichiro Oda has personally gone on record saying this very thing about One Piece, where the reason why he puts so much extra content in things like SPS and databooks is very simply because he did not have enough room to include these details in the actual chapters. This fight for space is such a core part of what makes One Piece that in the last 400 chapters there have been only 3 double-page spreads that have contained just one image, where most of the time even these spreads have to include side panels for important story information. Yet, here in chapter 1159, an entire page and then some is dedicated to what is currently an entirely inconsequential scene. What however makes this scene even more suspicious is its placement in the God Valley flashback. God Valley is basically the biggest war we have ever witnessed in the lore of One Piece, but this is also its biggest storytelling problem, where it had to happen within a flashback. The God Valley incident is not only competing over chapters with the greater Elbaf flashback, but there is also a constant push for the story to return back to the Straw Hats in the present timeline. With these challenges, the way One Piece decided to tell the God Valley story was at an incredibly rapid pace. Huge fights that happened on the island, like Roger vs Whitebeard or Sebek vs Garling, were given only a few small panels. Several members of the Rocks Pirates, the Roger Pirates and the God's Knights were completely AWOL since the start of the incident, and the legendary God Valley incident only took 5 brief chapters to reach its climax. To put this into perspective, it took more chapters for the Orange Town arc to reach its finale, back when we were still in the 90s. I'm not necessarily blaming the story for depicting God Valley like this, and it's very understandable that not everything that happened during this event could have been shown, but this is exactly why it's so confusing. Where during the breakneck pace the manga used during God Valley, it decided to halt and dedicate an entire scene to this random ship. I'd now like to speculate that maybe this scene wasn't actually pointless. It has now been over 80 chapters since the black ship was originally brought up in the Egghead arc. Yet since this first mention, the manga has provided no new information about it for over 2 years. Even though this ship is mega important to the story, as it contains the last item Luffy needs before he can go to Laugh Tale. Considering how much time has passed, the manga could very well have in these past 80 chapters dropped at least a few more additional clues about this mystery that we might have missed. This is the thing about One Piece that I brought up earlier in this video, where a lot of things that at first seem irrelevant later turn out to be extremely important to the story. Just to take what has happened in this current arc as an example, even something like Rodo's identity as the Sun God was hinted at by something as minor as his footwear, which was actually introduced hundreds of chapters before Elbaf even started. I do not think this slave ship is potentially the ship used by the man marked by flames, only because it's black, but because this ship also had an entirely new design. The One Piece manga is absolutely full of scenes involving marine ships, but almost every single time We only ever see the standard Navy battleship design that One Piece has at this point been using for decades. This even went for something like X-Drake's pirate ship, which was essentially just a standard Navy ship with the colors inverted. Despite this history, the Navy ship transporting Kuma and the others was still given a completely original design. Personally, I think it's also a really cool design. It reminds me a lot of the special effort One Piece likes to put in important pirate crews' flagships, which honestly just makes the idea of this ship having an even bigger role even more likely in my eyes. Perhaps Oda and his team decided to draw it, just so that they could sell more merchandise. Yet I doubt this for some reason. Maybe I don't understand the Japanese toy market, but somehow I don't think a ship that was used to carry slaves to participate in a murder game would be the product flying off the shelves. Let's suppose, however, that somehow the idea of this video is actually correct. The man marked by flames is someone who participated in the God Valley incident, where he escaped the island by commandeering this vessel, and years later, he's still using it to protect the final road poneglyph. So, who actually stole this ship? Before I start breaking this down, I'll just ask anyone who's watched this far to subscribe. I'm doing these plugs again, since the analytics don't lie, but they really do work. It's not a bad bet that the man who stole this ship was one of the Rock's pirates. We saw that they all came to this island with Rock's ship, but when it came time to escape, they decided to abandon this vessel and escape God Valley through other means. At the same time, however, it is very easy to deduce that the man marked by flames cannot be several of the pirates who sailed with Zebek. For one, many of these characters are confirmed to be dead. We have seen Captain John, Gansui and Gil Bastard's corpses all in Thriller Bark, meaning that it is impossible for any of them to be the man marked by flames. Naturally, this also goes for Whitebeard. We can also knock off Stussy, Gloriosa and Big Mom all from the list of candidates as well, as the man marked by flames is literally said to be a man, not a woman. I think it is also incredibly unlikely for Kaido or Shiki to have taken this ship on God Valley, as it would have been completely unnecessary, where both of these characters could have just flown off the island. Just to throw him in here as well, it also could not have been Ochoku, as he did not even come to God Valley in the first place. Since all of these Rocks pirates are seemingly out of the pecking, could the man who stole this ship have potentially been one of the other pirates who took part in the God Valley incident? Or could it be possible that it was not actually a pirate? To be very honest, since the man marked by flames was introduced, I have actually never been that convinced by the idea that it is actually Monkey D. Dragon, but this could honestly be an incredibly strong piece of evidence for it actually being him, where Dragon could very well have hijacked this slave ship before leaving God Valley. This is because Dragon's flagship in the current story is not only also depicted as black in the manga, but its design is also incredibly similar to this ship on God Valley. Both vessels have this metallic looking hull, as well as the same middle structure that is on all marine ships. While there are a few differences, like the number of cannons, or the prow that literally looks like a dragon, these could well have been upgrades Dragon later added to the ship. It would also make a ton of sense for Dragon to steal this ship during God Valley. This is the event that made Dragon turn against the world government, but Dragon also specifically deflected because of how the government was treating the slaves and civilians on the island. We also know that Dragon had to find his own way off God Valley, where we now know he wasn't rescued by Kuma, but also that he as a former marine was an enemy of both the government and the pirates. Stealing a slave ship would certainly fit Dragon's moral compass, where Dragon hates neither the Marines or even the world government itself, but his true enemy are the Celestial Dragons. Dragon could very well see commandeering a ship that was used for the Celestial Dragon slaves as a just act. I actually did not come up with the idea of Dragon stealing this ship and later remodeling it as his flagship by myself. I randomly stumbled across it when looking up Google images for other videos, and the credit for the idea goes to a Reddit user by the name of Ani Inchi Anoish. If Dragon did actually go through with this, I also wonder if he, just like Kuma, could have rescued some of God Valley's civilians or slaves in the process, as I doubt Dragon could have sailed a ship this big by himself. We certainly know that Dragon, after deflecting, was obsessed with rescuing at least some people on God Valley, and he was completely distraught after he thought he'd failed to save either Shanks or Shamrock. So he could have compensated by evacuating any remaining survivors with this ship. I do, however, still have an issue with this theory, which is simply the idea of Dragon being the man marked by flames. Even if this part about the ship were to be true, this theory still does not honestly make sense to me. I have 3 big contentions about this theory. One is that Dragon is a world-renowned criminal whose face has been known to the public for years, so I really do not see how he could simultaneously gain this reputation as the mysterious man marked by flames. 2 is that the literal translation of the man marked by flames from Japanese is actually the man with the burn scar. I do not personally think that Dragon's mark looks like flames in the first place, but we also know for a fact that it is a tattoo, not a scar. My third and biggest contention, however, is that I really do not think anything in the story connects Dragon to Fishman Island or its road Poneglyph. Despite fans making popular theories about this for years, Dragon is not actually particularly knowledgeable about the Forbidden History, as he did not even know that the ancient weapons were real until Robin revealed it to him during the time skip. So him of all characters having the know-how to find Fishman Island's hidden Poneglyph, to me does not make sense. I also have to come clean at this point. Everything I just said about Dragon was something I'd written in this script before reading the latest chapter. In chapter 1165, it is actually definitively confirmed that Dragon did not steal the black slave ship to escape God Valley. All the stuff I said in this video about Dragon stealing a government ship to evacuate civilians on God Valley actually came true, but the ship Dragon stole was just a normal marine vessel, not the ship we saw at the beginning of the incident. Yet I think this scene also confirmed who truly was the one who stole the black ship. There is still one character who took part in the God Valley incident that fulfills all the criteria for the one who could have taken this black ship, but he also fits all the other evidence we have about the man marked by flames, where even his race is a clue as to why he of all the participants would have wanted to take the ship that was used for slavery. When I earlier went over the Rocks pirates, you might have noticed that I conveniently did not mention one member of the crew. This is because I had to save him here for the end, where I think the man who stole this ship from the government and later became the man marked by flames is Barbell, the fishman of the Rocks pirates crew. If you however want to hear why it's most definitely him, you will have to click here to watch this video, where I break down why this is the character who currently holds the key to the One Piece. Thanks a lot to the members of this channel for their plunder. I know I've said this a lot in recent videos, but I really want to upload way more content before the end of the year, so be on the lookout. But as always, thanks a lot for just watching this video to the end.